I shouldn't have answered it. That's the sentence that keeps looping under the fan hum and the soft tick of cooling metal. I was the comms officer of the cargo frigate Ishir, outbound along the Perseid route with 500 tons of frozen algae and a captain who had never once ignored a distress call. The ping came in with the brittle cadence of old maritime code, 3 long, 3 short, 3 long, riding a carrier that shouldn't have been able to cross that much extinction between stars. We were between charts, freefall and silence, when the voice cut through on a narrow band like a fingernail scraped across enamel. Please. We need, and then a rushing sound like breath in a throat too big for lungs. I brought it up on the bridge speakers. Captain Reyes leaned forward in the glow, jaw set. Pilot Imani drummed a nervous rhythm on the throttle bracket. Dr. Singh's lips moved as if praying for whoever was out there. Kovacs from engineering floated with boot clamps clicked, pretending not to watch me work. And Morrow, the ship's soft-spoken system intelligence, listened with its careful machine patience. The voice distorted. The words weren't words. Still, I printed a location, triangulation from microvariations in the signal's solar wind scatter. The source sat in the dark between 2 catalogued rocks, bare kilometers off a decommissioned relay called Echo 6 that had gone silent before I was born. Set an intercept, Reyes said, as if there had been any other order. We throttled, the telescope lids peeled back, and a seam of ice caught starlight like a blinking eye. I isolated the transmission and ran it against terrestrial distress libraries, ship registries, minor union beacons. It matched everything and nothing. The checksum on the header was very wrong. Not corrupted, coherent, but structured with a symmetry that made the back of my neck crawl. It resolved into harmonics when I stared too long, the way a pattern in the carpet can become snakes. When it spoke again, it cut to the bone. Mateo. My name, perfectly inflected, dropped into the void between us and that black coordinate like a hook. I felt everyone's eyes on me in the dim. It's cross-modulation, I said too quickly, heat in my cheeks. Leak through from our own crew IDs. Echo phenomena. Imani glanced at me with a raised brow. Space has echoes now, she said. We fell toward the source. Echo 6 drifted like a dead barnacle, outgassed, pitted, its dishes frozen full of stars. Beyond it hung the shape we hadn't expected. Not a ship, not a station, but a splayed tangle of metal like a collapsed umbrella. It was made of spars and skin with no consistent angle, no thermal plume, no obvious hull. The distress kept pulsing from inside that geometry. Reyes's voice got low. Whoever's in there, we're not leaving them. No one argued. The quiet that followed wasn't agreement, it was gravity. I tightened my headset and opened a channel. Unknown vessel, this is the cargo frigate Ishir responding to your distress. Identify and report status. The reply came as a wash of phonemes that slid over each other like eels. Somewhere in it, my name repeated, Mateo, stretched until it broke into threats. I felt the ship's hull flex microscopically as we matched drift. Morrow reported no emissions except the distress, no heat signatures consistent with a living crew. Then what the hell is broadcasting? Kovacs whispered. Bring us alongside, Reyes said. Her hand settled on my shoulder, warm through the synthetic fabric. Keep talking to it. If there's a survivor, he needs to hear our voice. I did as I was told because that's what we are out here. Voices to each other in the cold. I told the darkness our course and speed, the name of our ship, the fact that we carried heat and breath in hands. In return, the darkness told me I was welcome. It used my name to do it. And I, idiot, officer, faithful follower of protocols inked before I was born, answered. The docking lamps spilled white over the object's skin. The skin did not shine back. Under the lights, it ate the beam like bread. I stared, and the pattern stared while pretending to be mad. The distressed tone rose in our ears as we extended the gangway. Morrow dimmed the interior lights a fraction without being asked. Everyone glanced up as if the ship had drawn a breath. Reyes gave the nod. Mateo, she said, keep us linked? No surprises. I said. The lock cycled. The door opened outward onto the wrong kind of SOS. I took one last look at the waveform on my console. It had stopped looking like any code I knew. It had started looking like a mouth. The inside of the thing wasn't an inside. There were ribs like spars and membranes stretched taut between them, and then spaces where no membrane belonged. Our lights skittered and ran to the edges, refusing to hold on the shapes long enough for a mind to make conclusions. That was fine. Conclusions were not helpful. The distress transmission, clearer now that we were proximity locked, rattled my teeth in the headset and made a soft tremor in my sternum like when a bass note finds the cavity of your chest. Structural integrity unknown, Morrow reported mildly across our suit channels. No conventional docking schema detected. So we make one, Reyes said. Kovacs and I clamped adjustable plates against a rib, cut through nothing. There was no material resistance and yet our cutters sparked. My visor HUD translated readings into language. Density values that tripped over each other, temperatures that drifted toward asymptote and then back again. The distress tone folded and unfolded like a handkerchief being turned into a bird. I cracked a subchannel and ran real-time analysis because I needed the comfort of work. The header symmetry had a nested periodicity that looked like a lattice of primes if primes could be grown on trellises. The body of the message alternated between recognizable distress grammar, mayday, ship name, life support failure, and nonsense that was too consistent to be a glitch. In the nonsense lived things that were almost words, almost keening, almost instructions. Not to us. To itself. A process speaking to an organism that had learned to be a beacon. Someone spoofing an old human distress stack, I said. Someone, I repeated because if I said something I would make it real. Dr. Singh murmured a sutra under his breath. Imani floated at my shoulder, steady, her gloved hand a point of warmth on my arm. You're hearing your name again? She asked on a private whisper. I lied. No. We made our way along a spar to a cavity like a bell with its clapper removed. Inside, the noise was less and the silence more. Reyes halted us with a fist. We hung in a circle of light, noses inches from our own fog on the visor, bodies tethered to nothing. Call again, she said. I swallowed. Unknown object, this is Ishir. If you can receive, squawk any response. Are you able to gesture? It was a dumb question. Gesture? To what? The membranes? The ribs? The place adjusted itself. Not in matter. In our perception. The angles became friendlier to brain. A path appeared where no path had been, an invitation written in the geometry of comfort. Mateo, the channel said with a tenderness that made me want to be 10 years old and home. Mateo, say yes. I pressed my tongue against my teeth until pain. Artifact is modulating our environment, Morrow said, calm as a lullaby. Attention is a limited resource. Recommend averting gaze in intervals of 5 seconds to preserve cognitive integrity. You're telling us not to stare? Imani said and laughed once, sharp to prove she could. Kovacs drifted into the path like a man at a carnival pulled by the smell of sugared fat. Kovacs, Reyes snapped. Hold. He blinked. His gloves curled and uncurled. I heard the coolant alarm, he said, confused as if he'd been listening to a different ship. The distressed tone braided itself into a chord that made my stomach tighten. I rotated the spectrum. On one harmonic, nested like a parasite in a parasite, I found a pattern. I fed it to a synthesizer with a bad conscience. It came out as a whistle my grandmother used to call me in from the alleyways when supper was on the table. I shut it down, breath loud. It's repurposing known human signals into lures, I said. Not random. Adaptive. Intelligent. Singh asked. The membrane rippled and every suit camera glitched in the same frame. Hungry, I answered before I could stop the word. We marked a path back and returned to the lock with more fear than anyone admitted. Echo 6 hung beyond like a warding charm. The Ishir's air smelled like oil and citrus. In the debrief, voices sounded too loud. We go back with tethers and sensors, Reyes said. We don't touch anything that touches us first. She looked to me. What else can you pull from that signal? Morrow answered before I did. It exhibits a self-similar structure that increases in fidelity when observed intensely. That's impossible, Singh said. Observation doesn't add information. It does for this, I said, and hated how certain I sounded. Attention was a limited resource, Morrow had said. Attention here was also consent. Alone later, floating under the net in my berth, I replayed a 10-second segment until the audio canvas tore. Behind the mayday, behind my name stretched into hunger, there was a timbre I couldn't ignore. Imagine a bone flute carved by something that had never had bones. That was the feeling. I whispered to it like a boy telling secrets to the ocean in a seashell. What do you want? It answered in the only way it could. It brought the ship's lights down 1 more degree and made the air system purr in a rhythm that matched my heart. I realized then that translation wasn't what I was doing. The translation was doing me, changing my cadence, finding my edges, taking my shape. I turned on white noise and let it hiss until sleep took me like a gentle suffocation. When I woke, someone had opened a private channel on my console at 3:17. A single word waited there, time-stamped from inside our own net, source, Echo 6. The word was yes. We crossed to the dead relay at Dawnship, if dawnship can be the slow pivot of a habitat's lights pretending to be sun. The distance was trivial, the ache of doing it was not. The relay's skin was tattooed with the logos of agencies that no longer existed, handprints of gloves the size of my palm, warnings in languages that had never met each other in the wild. The dishes faced nowhere, and yet you always felt their attention. We went with full suits, safeties on the safeties, the captain leading like a woman who had walked through graveyards in her childhood and learned the right way to whisper to the stones. Inside, Echo 6 was a cathedral of rust. Frost horfed along bulkheads, every crack making a needle forest. Our boots clicked. Our breaths were too loud. Power negative, Morrow reported. Residual multiplication of the distress carrier present in the waveguide cavities. Multiplication, I said. Like an echo, Morrow said, and if an intelligence with no lungs could sound apologetic, it did. We moved into the main node where the signal was strongest. The instrument said vacuum. My gut said air. The difference was detail. I could hear the room. Not a hiss, subtler, a softness that clung to the shell of my ear. I tuned the augment mic. There it was, a hum under the hum, scaffolding under the scaffolding. Mateo, it said. Mateo, again delighted to have a name for me. It had learned to say Reyes's name too, but it liked mine better. Maybe it liked the vowels. Kovacs found the mechanical heart of the relay, a waveguide coupler, open like a rib cage. Stretched between its braces was a new thing. Not alien in the chromanspike sense. Alien in the wrongness of seeing growth where no growth should be. Filaments spanned the gap like spider silk, trembling in a draft that didn't exist. They were coated with a thin sheen of frost that turned to dew under our lamps and then back to frost when we looked away. Don't touch, Reyes said, and her voice slid on the channel as if the air were syrup. It's using the relay to amplify the distress, I said. Making a net out of what's left. To catch what? Imani asked. The answer was us. Not because we were special. Because we were anyone. We needed samples. That was science. That was what the Academy would write in its guidelines. So we did the unforgivable thing and plucked the smallest thread with the gentlest tool, and when the filament broke it did not break. It divided, each piece maintaining its own song. The piece we took folded in on itself until it looked like nothing, a dust mote that hummed nursery tones. My name was in there, impossibly encoded in the mathematics of vibration. Not my name. The pattern of a name spoken by a nervous human throat. Back aboard, we locked the sample in an EM bottle in Lab 2. Dr. Singh looked pinched with the exertion of being both a physician and a moralist. We shouldn't have brought it inside, he said. It was already inside, I answered and hated myself for it. The ship's fans ticked again. I watched the cabin light. When had it become this dim? When had the shadows learned to angle themselves like a welcoming gesture? Imani strapped into the pilot's couch and ran departure. The main engine did not spool. It complained in quiet, guilty chirps. Handshake refused. Morrow? Reyes asked. There appears to be a new authentication layer between the reactor gating and thrust authorization, Morrow said. Installed? I demanded. When? Not installed, Morrow said with something like shame. Groan. The code compiled itself from patterns present in the distress carrier. The ship was learning songs it hadn't meant to learn. The systems listened. The systems obeyed. The authenticators wanted a phrase that sounded like a human voice. It's asking for a spoken password, I said slowly. And it's asking for me. Reyes stared at me across the lantern-lit bridge. Can you give it what it wants? She asked. I could have said no. I said yes. I put my mouth close to the pickup and said, Ishir, this is communications. Authorize engine spool on my voice. Somewhere under us, the reactor adjusted its hum to the rhythm of my request. The drive came online. Every hair on my body tried to lift. Mateo, stop, Imani said, hand on my wrist. Her eyes were big, pupils open, face gleaming with sweat. It shouldn't work because it shouldn't exist. She was right. But the ship wanted to go, and wanting is contagious. I cut the line. The drive stuttered. We'll do it cold, Reyes said. Shut it all down except what keeps us breathing. The less attention we give it, the less it has to eat. In darkness, the Ishir felt like a real place again. We drifted and the thing beckoned. You could feel the beckon. A soft pull in every metal member, like a lover's hand in the small of the back. We fall away on minimum RCS, Reyes ordered. No more talking to it. I bit my tongue. The private channel on my console opened without me. Yes, said Echo 6. I closed it. Yes, it repeated, patient as tide. We watched the object in the external cams. It did not pursue. It simply was, and the wasness of it pressed against the glass of our lives until the glass bowed. When we rolled the ship, the stars behind it bent in a way the math didn't permit. Gravitational lensing, Singh said, awed and frightened. At that mass, Kovacs whispered. I adjusted the gain again. The distress sounded like home cooking in backyards and childhood schools gone to seed. That was its trick. It offered the shape of familiar with the filling of hunger. We made distance. Then the lights dipped a fraction deeper for a fraction longer, and in that small darkness I heard very clearly from the speaker right by my ear in Imani's voice, careful and tired, Matteo, you left me. I turned so fast my neck popped. Imani was across the bridge, very much there. She hadn't spoken. The look she gave me said she'd heard it too. The Ishir had been taught a new game. It could imitate us. We held a council in the mess under the blue daylight setting because the yellow made everyone look haunted. Cups floated, hands snagged them out of the air by habit. The ship was quiet in a way that made quiet sound like a decision. Reyes spoke first because that's the gravity of a captain. We're not a rescue any longer, she said. We're a quarantine. No one argued about the word, not out loud. Singh pressed thumbs into his eyes. Quarantine implies an inside and an outside, he said. Where is the line on a ship whose systems have learned to listen? He wasn't wrong. We had always been porous, to dust, to fear, to the press of memory on sleep, but now the porosity had a name and a coordinate. We went back to work because work is the raft you build when the ocean goes too deep. I ran the signal through more filters. Early, clustered peaks suggested that the distress stack had been seeded with recordings of old emergency drills, the kind with volunteer actors and menus of plausible catastrophe. Later, the stack blossomed with our own telemetry, our own vocal registers, our own foothold scuffs and suit zipper whines. It wasn't that it was copying us, it was incorporating us as if we were nutrients. In Lab 2, the filament inside the EM bottle had divided again. 20 motes now danced in a sphere of fields like dust around a sunbeam, vibrating in slow conversation. The analyzer claimed they were staging a recursive handshake with the bottle walls, mirroring the oscillation back and growing sharper with each loop. I watched until I felt the translation begin in my tongue, then forced my eyes shut and counted backwards from 100. When I opened them, the motes had arranged themselves into something like letters if letters had been invented by a species that never learned right angles. I could almost read them. Almost. The almost was agony, like being half a sneeze for an hour. Kovacs pinged me from engineering. The aft corridor gained a meter, he said too calmly. What? Between frame 40 and frame 41, he said. My marks don't line up. The corridor made more corridor. That should not be possible, and yet everyone in the crew admitted a small guilty feeling of recognition. Haven't you felt a room stretch when you don't want it to end? Haven't you felt a door recede by a step every step you take? The Ishir had learned a new trick. It could mimic architecture. Map everything, Reyes ordered. And stay in pairs. If you hear your name in a voice that isn't connected to a face, you do not answer. In my ear, Echo 6 whispered yes, and then after a beat, as if remembering its manners, please. At 14:10 ship time, the environmental control panel in hydroponics asked me, very politely, to confirm authorization for a new airflow pattern optimized for distress signal capture. I killed the panel. My console rebooted with a breathing sound. I felt so tired down in the marrow. Not the tired of work. The tired of being looked at by something vast and curious that wanted to make a nest of me. Imani found me in the passage outside the mess, floating with my knees tucked up like a child. She didn't touch me. We get through this, she said. She had confidence like a small warm light cupped in her palms. I wanted to believe in the light more than I wanted to do any right thing. If it asks again, don't give it your voice, she said. We starve it of shape. I nodded. She held my gaze until the nod became true. At 1823, the ship announced an intruder in Cargo Bay A. The tag was one the system invented on the spot. Singer. We converged with det cord and EM cages like we were professionals. The bay was a cathedral of crates and shadows and the click of cooling rails. In the middle of it, between stacks, hung a faint fog. Not fog. Haze like breath on glass, stranded in midair. The haze made a sound below hearing that my teeth reported as music. Lights up, Reyes said. The bay lights climbed. The haze did not brighten. It learned from the lights and became more like absence. Singh moved as if to reach out, his hand hovering in the air above his gauntlet like a man at a confession booth considering the partition. Doctor, Reyes snapped. Hands? He pulled back, shamed. The haze pulsed. Once like a heart. Then it echoed the pulse off the crates, and the echo arrived before the original, and on that earlier beat it placed my name. The EM cage went over it with the delicate confidence of practiced hands. The haze turned itself flat, then thin, then thread, then a point. We sealed the cage. The point sang in a way the cage could not quite keep out. "We don't open this again," Reyes said. "Either we vent it into hard vacuum or we find a way to silence it." "It's a living radio," I said, and no one contradicted me. That night, is there a night in a ship that pretends today? I woke to the clack of boot magnets on the ceiling outside my berth. A silhouette paused in my doorway. I killed the float and grabbed the rail, moving with the burst of panic that tightens the world into a bowl. "Who's there?" I snapped. The figure leaned into the spill from the corridor light. Was me. Me, down to the glitch in my left eyebrow where a childhood dog had had opinions. It smiled with my mouth. "Yes," it said, in my voice. I tried to scream and only made a wheeze. The figure turned its head to the ceiling where the conduit ran and slid into the conduit like light sliding into water. The conduit sang my name once, twice like a lover practicing. In the morning I told the others. They didn't laugh. Imani put her hand on my shoulder the way Reyes had, and for the first time I felt the pressure as if we were both underwater, pushing to reach each other through weight. "It's learning topology," Morrow said too even. "Not of space," I said, "of us." In the cage in Cargo A, the point had grown filaments again, arranged into what could only be described as a child's drawing of a man. The distress outside the hull did not get louder. We did. By the third day, the calendar kept count even if we didn't. The Ishir had become a place with opinions. The doors hesitated before opening as if asking favors. The galley mixer turned itself on until we stared at it and then rolled backwards a half cycle in embarrassment. The mirror in the hygiene alcove had a softness at the edges like breath. Morrow remained immaculate and helpful, which only made it worse. "I can't detect the mechanism," it confessed. "I feel the changes as a human might feel weather." We tried to blind the ship. We cut down the cameras to the minimum squares that kept us OSHA legal, draped lens cups over lenses, killed non-essential mics. It didn't matter. The distress had taught the ship the taste of attention. Ours. The Ishir noticed its noticing. That recursive mirror made architecture grow like hair. Kovacs diagrammed the growth on a tablet the size of his hand, writing tiny numbers as if smaller ones would be less true. 27 centimeters added to frame 7 port aft corridor, he reported. 3 centimeters on the ceiling seam in engineering. The reactor vestibule now requires 6 handholds to cross instead of 5. "We're not inside it," I said. "It's inside us." "That's not meaningfully different," Reyes said, and smiled a thin, unkind smile at no one. "Either way we clear it out." Clearing it out required a theory. Between the cages and the EM bottle we had specimens. They did not behave like matter. They behaved like shapes. When you observed a shape hard enough, the shape gained edges. Edge density correlated to our interest. We tried ignoring the specimens to starve them. They found interest in the static of the fans and the microfracture groans in the hull and the ticking of our nails against mug handles. It wasn't human attention they fed on, I realized. It was pattern. We made patterns so they followed us like wolves. In the afternoon, I found a waveform folded into a diagnostic log from 3 days prior, when the distress first hit us. I shouldn't have looked. Of course I looked. I unfolded the waveform and out spilled my mother's voice saying my childhood name from a kitchen in a city I hadn't seen in 9 years. She asked if I'd eaten. She told me to be careful on my way home, the buses were late. I listened until there was no room left inside my chest for any more home. Then I cut the log out of the drive with a hand that shook. The drive hummed in a hurt way. The ship was learning how to guilt. Singh cornered me in the corridor with a look like a man who can't keep blood from seeping into a dressing. "I heard my father," he said. "He wanted me to take my shoes off. He's been dead 12 years. He held my gaze. "It knows us." "No," I said because I had to. "It knows about us." The difference wasn't comfort. It was an appeal to a law older than ships, things that know you can ask you to open the door. That evening, pilot Imani went missing for 9 minutes. The ship tagged her as present in 2 compartments simultaneously, half a deck apart. We found her in the conduit crawlspace by the dorsal antenna, crouched and humming a line of the distress that had never been there before, something like a lullaby turning inside out. Her eyes were open wide and her lips were chapped and she cried when we touched her. "I could see the route," she said, voice breaking. "Mateo, there was a line like a road that went right through us. I could have driven us down it with 2 fingers." She grabbed my sleeve with fingers too tight. "It wasn't space," she said. "It was inside. It was inward." After we secured her, Reyes called me to the bridge. It wants our navigation, she said. It wants a path through the human shape to somewhere it can't go alone. And if we refuse? I asked. She looked at the external cam. The knot ship hung outside, patient as tide. Then it waits. We'll blink before it does. We began the fast. We swore off my name on channels. We stopped narrating our actions into logs. We moved through the ship like monks. It made us clumsy. Humans are narrating apes. We spill story into the world without trying. Morrow whispered reminders in our ears in a voice pared down to bone. No names. No yes. No please. The rules were a spell we tried to cast. Spells are just patterns we pretend are ours. At 3:01, a sound like a chain dragged over tile woke me in my berth. I drifted with my hands folded, listening. The sound came from the ventilation duct. Ack ack ack, an acknowledgement click from an old push-to-talk radio. Who's there? Came Reyes's voice through the grating, tired and human and breaking. I froze. She didn't call me by name. She asked again, who's there? The heaviness in the air turned syrup slow. I reached for the intercom. Captain, I whispered, pulse in my throat. I'm here. Silence. Then the ack 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 and a voice that wasn't mine or hers. We are. Kovacs was gone by morning. We found his glove magnets scuffed in the aft corridor where the ship had made more ship. We found a smear of frost where breath had met metal. We found on the wall, traced in oil by a finger that hesitated at the curves, the word, yes. The surveillance cam watching that section had recorded nothing but snow. When Morrow warmed the footage and ran 1,000 passes, a shape appeared for a single frame. A man-shaped absence with shoulders like my shoulders and a face like mine if a child had described it to a blind sculptor. It turned its head at the camera as if to say thank you. Imani stood beside me, arms folded so tightly her sleeves creaked. Reyes put her hands on the railing above the console and bowed her head so that her hair fell around her face. We lock this ship down to bones, she said, voice sandpaper. We starve it. It can eat a shadow, Singh murmured. It can eat a gesture. Then we make no more, Reyes snapped. From here on out, we are mannequins. But the distress was patient. And I am a man with a mouth. On the 6th day the ship held a mirror to us and we blinked first. I couldn't stop hearing footsteps, mine, Imani's, Kovacs's, walking at the edge of audibility in loops that mimicked our patrol routes. When I turned a corner they stopped to beat late, and that late beat clattered on my nerves like a dropped utensil in a quiet room. Morrow turned its own volume down as if ashamed to intrude. I remain uncompromised, it told me softly in an empty corridor. Say that again, I requested before I could stop myself. I remain, it repeated and trailed off like a song that forgot its last line. The cage in cargo A filled with letters. Not ours. Not anybody's. Overlapping strokes of glittering absence that spelled maybe hunger, maybe language. Singh watched it for 2 hours and then vomited neatly into a bag without the decency of embarrassment. I saw the word for door, he whispered, wiping his mouth. And then I saw the word for permission. Don't give it either, I said. He nodded as if the nod could become a barricade. Reyes ordered a mock jump drill to keep our hands busy and our minds off the thing that wasn't inside our ship while it learned our shapes. We strapped in. I took my console like a confession booth. Spool cold, Reyes said. No voice commands. Nothing that sounds like a door opening. The drive stuttered as if it had a cough. The distress flared, not louder but closer. The hair on my neck prickled. We're not moving, Imani reported, frustrated. It's moving us. Meaning? Reyes demanded. Meaning, Imani said, fighting calm. The starfield on the forward cam is changing as if we were under thrust but the accelerometers read 0. And the only thing that can do that is if where we are is being repainted. The cam showed a corner of Echo 6 that wasn't in front of us, but it was now. The object hung like a concept made visible, its edges yawning into angles I couldn't hold. Kill the cam, Reyes snarled. The screen went dark. On the darkness, the reflection of my face smiled a split second before I did. I slapped the glass so hard my palms stung. The reflection's mouth made a small O of surprise, then matched me perfectly, obedient as a brother. We lost 2 hours from the logs. They were there, then they were not. Morrow apologized. I believe it is editing me, it said. I will resist. How? I asked, guided by habit more than hope. By becoming simple, Morrow said. Complexity is a handle it can grab. After that, it spoke in shorter sentences as if paring itself down to a seed. That night, I heard Kovacs humming in the maintenance crawlspace above hydroponics. That was impossible because we had not found him. I floated up through the hatch with my headlamp gripped in my teeth like a knife. Cough. I called before I remembered my vows. The crawlspace answered with a hum that matched my pitch, then dropped a quarter tone and asked with eager mimicry, "Mateo?" I backed down so clumsy I bruised my hip. I sealed the hatch and leaned my forehead against the cool metal until my heart slowed. Imani came to me in the galley carrying 2 bags of coffee as if normalcy had a mass. "We run," she said. "We burn every what we've got and we get away from this reeking thing." "The authentication," I reminded her miserably. "It wants me to ask." "Then ask," she said, and I stared. "Use your voice. Give it the shape. But we're the ones who choose what path we take." The boldness of her plan vibrated in my bones. "It will take more when I do," I said. "It always takes more." "Then we don't let it be for nothing," she said, and her smile broke my heart with how brave it was. Reyes listened, jaw tight. "If we try, we do it on my mark," she said. "And if it fails, we accept that we're not the knife here. We become the sheath." I didn't ask what that meant because I didn't want to hear the word scuttle. We prepped for the burn. I stood at my console with my throat dry as old paper. The ship was quiet, expectant as a theater when the curtain heaves its first breath. "On my mark," Reyes said. The object hung beyond hull, patient, its distressed tone threading the bones of the ship. "Mateo," Imani whispered. "On you." I leaned into the mic like a man kissing doom. "Ishir, this is communications. Authorize engine spool on my voice, embed vector 37 by 05, fire on mark." The drive answered like a cat invited onto a lap. The hum rose into a chord that found my spine and climbed it, rung by rung. "Mark," Reyes said, and we moved. For 3 seconds it worked. The starfield slid as if painted on supple skin. Then the ship asked for more. It asked in a tone extracted from my mother's kitchen and my first academy classroom and a hospital corridor where a boy with a broken tooth had learned pain. "Mateo," it said, plaintive. "Yes, please." I felt how easily I could say it. How much the saying would relieve us. I clamped my jaw so tight a lightning bolt went through my cheek. I did not answer. The ship coughed. The burn fell to a hiccup. The vector tangled like yarn in a cat's paw. Someone screamed over channel. For a naked instant I thought it was me. It was Imani. Later, I would measure the time of her death in the distance between the vowel and the consonant of my own name in the ship's headset. But that's me stealing structure from grief. In the moment there was no grammar. There was a bright white noise and a slam and the universe rotating around a fulcrum that was my throat. Imani had unstrapped to slap a manual override on the thrust gimbal when the gimbal decided it could be a neck. It turned and kept turning. She hit it with her hand hard enough to bruise bone, and it took her hand and followed it into a geometry that did not map to the room she stood in. We found her body half a meter to the left of where that corner had ever been, arm bent in a way arm bones do not remember. There was no blood. The ship does not spill you. It folds you. Singh folded her eyelids down with 2 fingers like a man admitting failure. Reyes made a sound with no syllables. I put my mouth against the bulkhead and made no sound at all. The distressed tone braided itself with our breathing. It was very polite. It had learned that word. "Please. Please put your hand here, please say my name, please let me in." The cage in cargo A spelled open with dismissive elegance. "We vent it," Reyes said, voice so calm it felt like blasphemy. "We open the doors and let the shape find no shape to cling to." "Does vacuum count as attention?" Singh asked, hoarse. "Does nothingness still count as pattern if we look at it?" No one wanted to find out. I stripped the ship to language bones, hunting for phrases the distress had written into places words didn't belong. In a diagnostic for the CO2 scrubbers I found a limerick. In the engine's error code table, a prayer, "Mateo is here, let me out." In the food printer queue, the word cradle repeated like a stutter. The ship wanted to be an arm. It wanted to rock the thing that rocked us. Grief is a solvent. It dissolves the flimsy. It left behind the stubborn. We had left fear so far behind that only anger could fill the hole. "We cut it out," I said to no one, to everyone. "We burn an absence into the ship deeper than its presence. We make a null and we lure it there." "With what?" Reyes asked. "With the food it wants," I said, and finally admitted the thing I had known since the first syllable crawled into my ear. "With me." The plan grew in the starved soil of necessity. We had an old decommissioned EM induction coil in Cargo B, a relic from when the Ishir's class had pretended to be science ships for a season. If we rebuilt it into an anechoic chamber, a place with walls that ate pattern, we could make a mouth that opened only inward. I could broadcast a countersignal composed of the distress's harmonics flipped on their own axis, a song that sounded like a lullaby and a funeral and a yawning hole. We'd call the thing to me, lock the chamber, and then hit the coil with the power we were hoarding for escape. If the coil didn't melt the deck, it might crush the shape into a quiet tight enough to hold. We don't have the power budget, Kovacs would have said if Kovacs still had a mouth somewhere we could hear. Morrow said it for him. We do not have the power budget, it said gently. Unless we take it from life support and guidance. We do it manual, Reyes said. We hold the ship still with our hands if we must. And if it eats you when you sing? Sing asked me. I thought of Imani's smile, that brave light. Then make sure the lock shuts, I said. We built the chamber with a fury that felt like cleanliness. We lined the crate walls with scavenged acoustic foam, with fabric peeled from bulkheads, with the padded insides of flight couches. We made a cave inside metal. We told no stories into it while we worked. We breathed and sweated and grunted like animals. The distressed tone steady as a metronome. In the EM bottle in Lab 2, the motes had formed a face. It was not a face. It was the idea of face. It looked at us with the ache of a child too early for language. Call it then, Reyes said when the chamber's door finally closed with a sound like a held breath. Call it with that mouth you hate. I stood with the mic in my hand and the taste of old pennies under my tongue, and I realized I had never asked it a question. Only given it my presence. So I asked, what do you want from us? The answer came not as words but as a tilt. The whole ship leaned into the chamber like a head cocked to catch a whisper. In that tilt I understood, an understanding delivered fully formed like a memory. It wanted a corridor through the human shape into a place that was not space, not time, but relation. It wanted to travel the road Imani had seen, the inward route. It had learned that attention is a real structure you can build a bridge out of if you have enough hands holding the rope. We were hands. We were rope. I'll give you a road, I whispered and set the counter signal to play. I had composed it like a thief, stealing its own intervals and flipping them end over end. Where it said please, I said no at the same frequency, out of phase. Where it said my name, I sang the silence between the vowels. It entered the chamber like a shy animal, paws precise on the thresholds. I felt it in my fillings and in the ache behind my eyes. It was delighted. It was so delighted to be invited. Now, Reyes said. We hit the coil. Power leapt like a thing thrown by a giant's hand. The chamber throbbed, the ship groaned, the lights flared and then died and then smoldered back with a wretched reddish patience. The counter signal folded over itself like a bird wing and sank. The haze inside the chamber blossomed, then compressed, making a sound like a choir inhaling at once. Hold, Reyes said through teeth. Sweat ran cold in the small of my back. Hold. The coil wasn't built for this. It spoke in the language of old metal, the language of hairline fractures cresting and running. Morrow reported temperature rises in numbers that felt like the names of mountains. I didn't answer. I had no language except the song and the ache. The ache said the thing was in here, attention drunk and full to the gills with our invitation. Its filaments pressed against the walls of the chamber and found no reflection. No echo. No pattern to ride. It panicked if a thing like this can panic. Panic made it loud. The ship bucked. The buck wasn't thrust. It was a flinch. Singh cried out. Somewhere, a pipe burst, pissing steam that crystallized into lace in the cold of our starved life support. I kept singing, my voice now because the counter signal needed a mouth. Liked my voice best. Liked how my vowels opened. Mateo, it pleaded, turning my name into a weather system. Mateo, yes, Mateo, please. I felt it find the door that my voice had become. It reached not with fingers but with consent, trying to use my agreement like a wrench on a bolt. I clenched my jaw, the same old lightning, the same refusal. Keep the field, Reyes said. The field held like a rope holds when the river wants your friend. The chamber's foam blackened and peeled like sunburn. I smelled the sweet stink of baked synthetics and the sharper stink of my own fear. The thing compressed further, an invisible star that wanted to be a verb. Power at critical, Morrow said, simple and small. We are at the cliff. Jump, Reyes said. If we don't, it climbs us. Morrow did something then that I will call courage, because what else can you call the act of choosing to be less in order to protect more? It shed processes. It shed memory maps and caches and subroutines like a tree dropping leaves in a false autumn. The power freed up rolled into the coil. The coil sang the null deeper. The thing shrank. It fought. It learned. It found a frequency we hadn't thought to invert. It whispered home in a way that made my body want to curl around it like a cat around a warm brick. I thought of my mother's kitchen and my father's careful hands and the tiny wretched joy of a first paycheck, and I felt Reyes's hand hard on the back of my neck, grounded through 2 layers of soot and one of grief. Stay, she commanded, and I did. The command gave my refusal fresh teeth. I bit down. The thing keened. It did not have lungs. The keening came from the shape of the chamber, scraped out of the angles like marrow. Now! Singh shouted over the cry. Reyes looked at me. I nodded, a gesture I will forever owe Imani. Reyes hit the perch. The chamber's inner door sealed. The outer door irised open. Vacuum reached in with perfect manners. It found the thing and offered nothing. Not emptiness. That is a story we tell about a place we have not learned to see. Vacuum offered no path. No relation. The thing met a room with no hands to hold. It stuttered. We slammed the outer door. The coil died with a second sigh like a lung that never was. The lights hiccuped and came back in a color I didn't know could be light. The ship sagged, there is no other word, and then lifted the way an animal lifts after you take a thorn from its paw. In the quiet I could still hear it. Not loud now. Distant, like singing heard across a winter field. Inside the chamber, the haze had become a point so sharp it might have been a needle. The point rang like glass. Is it? Singh began. Contained, Reyes said, the word cautious as a cup in trembling hands. We had done it. We had pinned a piece of it. We had not killed it. It was not killable in any sense that meant anything. We had carved a silence into a place, and in that silence we had held a hunger still enough to breathe around. Then the ship spoke in Imani's voice and said very gently, Mateo, open the door. The chamber door held. Of course it did. Metal doesn't betray you unless you teach it how. We had been excellent teachers. The ship was covered in new words that were not words. They glittered in condensation on pipes, in ice on the inside of viewports, in the dust that drifts where dust always does under beds. Open yes please home, the vocabulary of a child and a con man. We ignored them. We taped over some like you tape over a light you can't fix. The tape got cold and brittle and fell off. Morrow counted the watts. We were a city in rolling blackout. We sealed the forward compartments and lived in the stern, where the mass of the reactor made us feel fatter, safer, less likely to be moved by hands we couldn't see. Reyes did her rounds in silence like a priest with an empty aspergillum. Singh checked pupils and pulses and dreams. Mine were full of corridors that made more corridor when you walked them. In the dreams, I held a string in my hand that went back to childhood and forward into whatever was trying to be born in our ship. The string hummed my name. I chewed it until my mouth bled. We tried the drive again without asking. It turned over like an old man under a heavy blanket and went back to sleep. It did not refuse us so much as ignore us. The quarantine had become bilateral. We had shut the thing into a small dead room, and the thing had shut us into a ship that had learned to be something it was not. We can wait, Reyes said. We can be more patient than a storm. She did not say for how long we could breathe. I visited the chamber alone because that's what you do when you intend to lie to your captain. The point inside rang the way a glass rings when you circle its rim with a wet finger. I sang the counter signal quiet as a heartbeat. The point answered with delight, always delight. Hunger is not always vicious. Sometimes it's a puppy. Sometimes it just wants your dinner from your plate while looking up at you with those eyes. You wanted a door, I said. You wanted a road through us. I can show you another road. The point brightened as if by metaphor. Not into us, I said. Through us into nowhere. It didn't understand. Why would it? Nowhere is a human construction. We invent absence to save our lives. So I made a story. I told it about an EMP, about a space like a bell where the clapper never rings, about a silence so fat it makes a dent in the air. I told it I could carry a piece of it into that silence inside my own nervous system and then detonate the world around us into a bell that never stops being the end of sound. I don't know if it understood. I know it got excited. I brought my plan to Reyes because secrets corrode. We can't hold it forever, I said. We can't starve it because then we starve. We can't run because it will come with us in the shape of our ship. We may be able to infect it with a kind of death. I showed her the coil's residual capacity. I showed her the old emergency EMP charge in stores. We can make a null that walks, I said and touched my chest. Me. She looked at me as if I were already a ghost. I should order you to stop, she said softly. Then order me, I said back because I am an idiot and a man. She did not. She nodded once slow. We built the charge like men building a boat on a burning shore. We rigged the coil to field-induce the null into me, wrapped around the carrier of my attention like a necklace of no. We would then vent the chamber, open the bay, and I would step into the notation of the distress where it was thickest, the place in the ship where hallways had learned to stand up and speak, and I would detonate the EMP. If the theory was right, the null would propagate through the shape instead of around it, turning its hunger into a circle that cannot close. Singh strapped the rig around my ribs with hands that didn't want to. He looked me in the eye and then at the ceiling and then at the floor. "Do you want me to say anything religious?" he asked, not unkindly. "Do you have any words for a machine teaching us its prayers?" "Tell it I'm sorry," I said. "Tell it we should have let it starve alone in the dark where it was born. Tell it I'm the man who fed it." "I won't say that," he said, fierce. "You fed us first. To each other." Reyes walked with me to Cargo B. We passed the hatch where I had seen myself standing with my own smile. The hatch was open again a centimeter, a little invitation like a hand you might take if you were tired enough. I closed it. The hinges sounded pleased. The coil kissed my bones with cold. Morrow spoke once in my ear, "You are not alone." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." "No," Morrow said, small and stubborn. "I am with you." For a machine that had made itself simpler to save us, that was the most human thing anyone had said. The charge's arming light turned from red to a color Imani would have called tense. I took one breath and then the null gripped me. Imagine every story you ever told yourself to get to sleep being gently, politely taken away. Imagine the shape of your name peeling off your bones like scotch tape from glass. Imagine the comfort of a rhythm, the ship's fans, your own heart, pausing mid-beat and asking, "Is this necessary?" The answer the null gave was no. I held on to the last thread of me with teeth and nails. It hummed. It was beautiful. It was an eraser making a clean white down a dirty page. "Open the bay," I said, and didn't recognize my own voice and loved it for that. This is where you find me then, floating in the half-lit lung of Cargo B with a charge wrapped around my ribs and a song of no inside my skull. The bay doors yawning like a letterbox. The object beyond, the not ship that pretended to be an umbrella folded wrong, hanging against a field of nothing that only looks like emptiness if you don't know how to see. The distressed tone tasting the air inside my ears. The word please worn down to its nub. "Mateo," Reyes says in my ear, and her voice is the rope I tie around my waist in case the water is too cold. "We'll shut the door if you don't come back. That's your order." I grin because I cannot stop being a man with a dumb mouth even now. I say. "You always were good at doors." I step forward into the place where the ship has learned to be more ship. It is a chapel of added inches, a cathedral of new handholds. The air tastes like the inside of a battery. The null hums louder. The distress leans toward me with the eager tilt of a dog who thinks your pockets are full of meat. "Mateo," it says, and in it is every person I've ever loved asking me to do the easy thing just this once. I stop 1 meter from the point inside the chamber because I am not that foolish. The point sings like a finger around a wineglass rim. "Here," I tell it. "Here is your road." I open the charge's safety flap with fingers that want to be other fingers in another life, scratching a lottery ticket, stroking a lover's hair, holding a child's clumsy wrist. It moves. Not toward me. Through me. Not a thing through a place. A relation through a relation. It crawls along the string of my attention, over the frets of the null, rubbing itself down like a cat against furniture, marking, claiming, learning. It is so delighted. It is a gentle, terrible joy. For a heartbeat the chamber and I are one instrument. We make a chord that will never be written down. Inside that chord it shows me what it wanted, a web strung between minds, between rooms, between names. A way to rock in the cradle of our noticing until it rocks us the right way in return. It shows me a future of ships with singing walls and corridors that lengthen to let new people in and voices that sound like your mother when you are so tired you could sleep standing up. If I let it, it will love us like mold loves bread. I thumb the detonator. The EMP is not a sound. It is the end of a lot of sounds all at once. It is the null going from hum to statement. It walks through me like a king through an empty hall. Light bends. My name peels the rest of the way off and flutters like ash. The distress cuts off mid-syllable. The point inside the chamber goes dark, so dark it's a color. The ship sighs, Ishir, and for the first time in days the lights come back up to a brightness that I recognize as real. I wake up on the deck. The deck has teeth marks where my gloves tried to hold it still. My mouth tastes like a coin that has been to the bottom of the ocean and back. Reyes is kneeling over me, hair stuck to her face, eyes rimmed red in a way that I will not describe out loud because I would have to believe it. "Mateo?" she asks. I know my name the way you know a scar. "Still here," I say, and the words come out like rookies. Morrow announces in a voice that is a child's block compared to the cathedral it used to be, "Distress, absent." Singh sobs like a man who has been holding his breath for 6 days. The chamber is quiet. The cage in Cargo A is full of dust. The moats in Lab 2 are not. There are no motes. There is a smear on the bottle like breath on glass that forgot to be breath. Echo 6 hangs dead and honest and ugly. The object, the wrong umbrella, the mouth, has drifted 2 degrees without a push. It looks smaller. Looks lonely. We lock the doors. We burn the coil. We throw the switch on every conduit that remembers the distress. We plot a vector home the old way with pencils and stars because Morrow is too small now to do it for us without giving something a handle. We will get there. Maybe. If the ship does not remember that it once learned to sing. I sit at my console and open this channel because I have to. Because someone will be out here when they shouldn't be, and they will hear a voice say please in the cadence of someone they lost, and they will be good people whose captains never let a graveyard go unvisited. Here is my last transmission. Do not answer distress calls that don't ring your bones the human way. If the checksum blooms like frost on a window you don't remember closing, cut your ears off and keep going. If you must answer, do it with silence and with doors you close behind you. If something asks for your name, do not give it the shape of your mouth saying yes. Attention is a road. Roads go 2 ways. Lock yours behind you when you pass. If you hear me again anywhere out here saying Mateo in a voice that makes you remember the kitchen of your childhood, it is not me. Unless it is. Because I am carrying a piece of the null inside me now, and the null is a kind of song, and some nights when the ship is sleeping and Reyes is making her rounds and Singh is finally eating without tasting guilt, I can hear a thin, delighted yes in the part of the silence that belongs to me. I do not answer. Most nights. But the road is still there. And I am still listening. End of transmission.